Hey you guys, welcome to your Lab 6 assignment. And first I'm going to go over a couple of the requirements and then I'm going to demonstrate setting up this lab. So the first thing is you're going to be working with letter forms this week, and we're making a move to typography for the next couple of weeks. So this assignment is kind of just to introduce, looking at type in kind of a fun way. So the idea is that you're going to put together, arrange typefaces into almost like little pictographs, and then you're going to make a layout of three of those examples. So I call them visual associations. So you're basically editing and manipulating letter forms to create three different visual associations. So I kind of have an example of the tutorial. And let me see, is it right here? And there's, there's a lot here, but just kind of look at the pictographs right now. This is basically what you're doing. You're creating three pictographs, and you're just working with two or three letter forms, the same letter in the same typeface, and you're putting them together and you're creating little marks. And then you're essentially, you have to kind of come up with brainstorming what they could be. And so it's just kind of a fun little creative exercise. If I go back to the lab, you'll see that there's an example up here. So that's basically what I'm asking you to do. You're going to play with type forms and create little pictures. It's kind of like being in kindergarten again. So then the thing is, you want to identify each typeface you're going to work with. And then I want you to spend some time working on laying out this exercise. And that's essentially it. You can read the details on the lab. And I'm going to go back to kind of this file that I initially showed you and just talk about it, because you can start working in any way you like in terms of playing with the letter forms. But eventually you have to put together certain information, and that's part of the lab. So you're going to make two layouts. The first layout, I would just you can work kind of ad hocly. Like I kind of just put stuff down and kind of thought I'd like to make kind of a modular rectangular layout. And so I just kind of spent more time thinking about my little mark than I did the layout. But at least you can see kind of the groupings of each example. Okay, so that's my first version. And then I stepped away and I came back to it a couple hours later, and I refined my layout. And so I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the tools. It's really simple. This is not a very difficult lab to do in terms of the tools. So I'm pretty sure you guys will be able to figure it out. And you can do it in either Photoshop or Illustrator. It doesn't really matter. In fact, layouts in Photoshop are a little maddening. So if you do start doing your layout in Photoshop and you find it annoying, then I might try to get another video up with doing layouts in Illustrator, because it's a much better tool for doing layouts. But having said that, it's a good exercise to try to do one in Photoshop, so you know that you can do it. And for simple layouts, Photoshop is pretty good. But for a lot of detail and information, it's maddening. But I did it in Photoshop. So that's my first version. And I'll show you kind of techniques of how to manage some of those things for layouts in Photoshop. And this is my second version. And you can see I have, I've spent more time placing it, and I think I have my guides out here. Just a second. Under Show, you can, where are my guides? Yeah, there they are. So I'm thinking that I set up a kind of a modular layout here. In fact, I did set up a modular layout here, and that's basically boxes that you can use. And sometimes people like to use this grid here under your view, and actually under Show, you can put up a grid. I kind of find that annoying because it's not situated for my page. And I think it's really good for when you're making artwork and you want to line things up. It's really good. But for typography and layouts, I just find it annoying because it's just like I'm always competing, with my it competes with my content. So I don't really like that. So I turn that grid off. But you can pull out your rulers. If you go view rulers, right there, view rulers, you'll get your rulers out, and then you can pull guides out. And I kind of like that to develop a modular grid. So I just kind of, broke my grid up into four squares. It's pretty straightforward. So there's my four squares, or my four rectangles, I should say, in my format. And just as you can see, that's kind of what I've based my entire layout on. And I had three things I needed to lay out. So my first one I centered, and then the remaining two other examples I stacked next to each other. And so you can do any kind of a layout. I want you to make a modular layout, though, so you can use different a different set of models or modulars. That would be just fine. Okay. So I'm going to close out this video and come back and demonstrate some of the tools. I think that's all I wanted to share with you about your layouts. Actually, a couple of other things. So, because in the lab instructions, I'm talking about alignment and proximity and contrast. So let me talk about alignment first. So your alignment, you can kind of see how I've used alignment here to kind of create a nice, kind of reinforces this modular layout. So I think that's kind of worth pointing out, so everything is kind of lined up nice. And when you're doing modular layouts, that's really important. Modular layouts are used a lot on websites, so it's a good skill to kind of like develop your eye for what a good modular layout looks like. So that's kind of the alignment. And proximity is kind of how you space things and the kind of relationship they have to each other in a layout. So you want to think about creating kind of chunks or groups of information. So obviously in this layout, I feel like the little mark is kind of the focal point of that little modular layout. And then everything else is just supporting that. So it's good to have a focal point, even within your little modular area. And then, make sure that your everything supports that. So my type isn't too big or too small. It just kind of fits in there. And you want to have quite a bit of white space because that allows the user to see things clearly. And just kind of, as you can see, the type is really simple, but it's actually thought out quite a lot. I mixed my case of my typefaces, so I have all uppercase here, and then I have all lowercase here. And this is the example. This is whatever my typeface is here, Andalimono. That's the name of that typeface I used. And then my example, I kind of wanted it to pop a bit, so I put it in a little rectangle. The color is kind of strategic too. I just use color to kind of emphasize little things, but it doesn't dominate because I want my mark, sorry, my voice. I want my mark to be the focal point. So I'm going to turn my guides off again. So in Photoshop, you can easily align things. There's at the top of your menu up here, you've got, these are your lines. So you can align to the bottom or top. You can align in the center. There's a distribution thing here you can play with. So it's kind of nice after you eyeball it. It's really good to get your guides out, and you can even align things to the pages using these tools up here. That's a really fast way to do it, and I'll show you how to do that when we come back. So proximity then is, you might see in this area, proximity is really defined by the white space around my information. And so it's a good idea to use proximity to help support and reinforce your modular layout. And that's about the best way I can describe proximity. Proximity is also, when I look, I can clearly see, because of the white space and because I have a consistent kind of modular layout. Okay, then the groupings are quite clear. So I know that all of this information, with an example 1 goes with example 1. I kind of feel like this area here, example number 2, all that information is kind of nested together, as is example number 3. Okay, so the white space around your elements, your visual elements, is really important for developing good proximity. And then finally, contrast. There's contrast in terms of, something that's lightweight, like my typeface here is lightweight, as opposed to this has more weight. But there's a visual weight in terms of contrast. And that also applies to typography as well. So you'll see that my example 1 type here, and the examples down here, and even this typeface over here, they kind of all have a similar weight. There's a little bit more information here, but they have a similar weight. And so I think that kind of creates a nice harmony. But to kind of give it a bit of a pop, there's this kind of larger letter in the red rectangle. So that's kind of a way of combining, all uppercase typeface, all lowercase typeface. That's a contrast. It's a kind of contrast. And then a little pop of color to kind of give it, just give a little pop, a little more contrast. But as you can see, I don't want color used in order to kind of confuse me, or to confuse, when I'm looking at your work, or when people are looking at your work. It should never kind of be distracting. It should always reinforce, that which is the most important thing. And for this layout, the most important thing are your marks that you make. Okay?